I'm Jessica and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jessica.
Thanks for Keith, but he's not here at the roundup, for asking me to speak. Let's see a little bit what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. My sobriety date is April 25th, 2007. I got sober when I was 18 years old, and I have 18 years sober, which is crazy. So what it was like, I like to think that I was born with the disease of alcoholism, but my environment surely did not sway me from that. I was born into a family of thriving alcoholics, and a couple Al-Anons like sprinkled throughout in there. I wanted to die before I even took my first drink, you know. I always felt like people say all the time, like somebody handed out the book of like how to be and how to exist, and I missed that day. That was like my story. I was awkward. I didn't fit in. I had a home, that was very volatile. There wasn't a safe place for me. I was miserable. And my first like love and like addiction was anger. I loved anger. I loved to fight. I loved to get in fights. I like to just cause problems. I remember taking my first drink, and, drugs are a part of my story. I got sober when I was 18. Alcohol was definitely not as easily accessible for me as drugs were. But I still, identify as an alcoholic because no matter what I get, like, I still, like, end up at, I do everything to the max. And I took my first drink when I was 12. Somebody brought like some wine coolers to school, and I remember taking a drink of it, and I was like, ooh, like I like that feeling, and after that, like I just sought out like every opportunity, my mom was like starting to like kind of get sober at that time. She had gotten like a couple DUIs, and I got introduced to the room of Alcoholics Anonymous secondhand. And I thought you guys were all full of crap, like just like church. I remember going to church when I was younger, like on Sundays or like for special events with these people who were getting DUIs and like being abusive. And like, I'm like, how are you guys like acting like this? That's how I felt like Alcoholics Anonymous was. I believed that like you guys acted a certain way here, and when you left, you didn't act that way. So I had this already, like, before I even, like, thought that Alcoholics Anonymous was going to be in my future. I wanted nothing to do with it. So I started my journey, drinking, doing drugs. I went, like, really hard out of the gate. I went straight to, like, using, like, really heavy narcotics. I ended up I had stolen a girl's credit cards, had beat her up, maxed them out online, and I got put in community service, and I met a girl who was doing really heavy narcotics, and I got involved in that. And I ended up in my first treatment center, Twin Town Treatment Centers, when I was 15 in Torrance. And I got introduced to Young People's Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would go to the Sunday night Young People's meeting in Hermosa. And I would sit outside, and I would be on like my little phone and pretend like anytime someone came up to talk to me, I'd be like, I'm busy, and hide in the parking lot and run across the street to like the Ralph's that was there and still cough and cold medicine and take that. And, my mom picked me up and dropped me off and like do the whole thing. And, I like started to like listen though. I started to like meet a few people that were my age that were getting sober, and they looked happy. They looked like things were like going okay for them. And I think I got my first sponsor like just on a whim, like because of like the treatment center when I was like 15. And I think I called her maybe like once. I didn't like have any desire to do the steps or participate in any of the things. God was definitely not something that was on the table for me. And that really turned me off when I would hear that, people sharing about that in meetings. And I ended up getting sent away to an inpatient treatment center in Orange County, Chapman, and I was there. And for a minute, I really was interested in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I enjoyed going to the meetings. But then like it came time for me to like do kind of like an inventory with like some of the counselors there, and I freaked out. I left, I AWOL'd from that center. I was not ready to like share those deep, dark things. For a while it was just in and out, in and out, in and out. I'd get like 30 days. Everyone started knowing me around the meetings, and I just couldn't get it. And then I just like got to this place finally, like my last drink was after I had 8 months sober. I had gotten a sponsor. I was working the steps. I did my inventory, and I left out some things. And then I got to the amends, and I left out some amends. And slowly I just started going down, down, down. And before I knew it, I was drunk. And I had no intention of drinking. I was like, I'm going to be sober. But, just like those little secrets, like just started, taking me down. And my sponsee sister at the time, they came to my house after they found out that I had drank. And they read me a story out of the back of the book called Empty on the Inside. And there was this like line in it that talks about, I believe that we get more than one moment of grace from God, but it's up to us to seize the moment by taking action. And I don't know why, like that, like I'd, read the book a few times and like done all that stuff, but that line just like, I never really thought that like, that it was up to me, that I had to like meet God's hand. Like I had to reach back out. I thought that God was just some genie, some like really messed up genie that caused like all these horrible things to happen in my life. I didn't think that I needed to like be accountable for anything. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like try. I'm going to do everything that my sponsor tells me to do. I'm going to do the steps and I'm going to see what happens. And I've been here for 18 years, so I guess it worked. My life is so huge. I learned how to do everything in these rooms. I learned how to, get a job and how to show up. I learned how to like show up for school and commitments. I became a mom in this program when I had 2 years sober. I became a single mom shortly after that because, I had enough, esteem to like know that I deserved to be treated properly. And these, I became a woman of dignity and grace most of the time. I was able to show up and do all these things. I've experienced a ton of loss in this program. I met my husband who will be speaking later, and we've been able to be married for a long time now. But like the main thing that I need to do is like my life can never get so big that like I don't show up here, right? Because like this was freely given to me and I'm supposed to be here to freely give it back. I owe my life to this program. I don't think I would have lived much longer. It's funny, I get so anxious over taking like a Tylenol now, and I used to, the things I would do, it's like, sometimes it's like, it feels like it wasn't my life, but like I have to like always keep in mind that I am very capable of still being that person. I am an alcoholic. I wasn't an alcoholic. I am still an alcoholic. And I continue to go to meetings. I continue to work the steps. And I continue to like, reach my hand out to the newcomer. And I am so grateful to be here. And if you're new or you're not new, I pray that you get to stay here too. So that's it. Thanks.
Marianne, can you do this? Can you lead us in the Serenity Prayer, please? Thank you. Okay, now our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Jonathon, right? Jonathon. Supposed to say where you're from, but nobody filled it in, so we're not doing that. You can say that.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, friends. My name is Jonathon, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. It's wonderful to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. First off, I want to thank all of you and thank Mary Ann for the wonderful hospitality and Jan for coordinating with the meeting and information, and Keith for asking me to come out here tonight. It's kind of a funny story. So Jessica and I, we were at a meeting, it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were at our speaker meeting together, or we were just at a meeting together. Anyway, so after the meeting, I meet Keith. I never met him before. And we start talking, and we're just 2 AAs after a meeting, just talking, doing like we do, right? And after, I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes or so of talking, he asked me, he said, "Oh, hey, are you going to be going to the roundup?" And follow me here, because it's kind of funny for a moment, right? There's a twist. And he said, "Hey, are you going to be going to the roundup?" I said, "Well, no, I wasn't planning on it." And he said, "Well, I'm looking for a speaker to speak the night of the roundup." And I thought to myself, it's a little bit late for them to be finding a main speaker for the roundup. I mean, they usually are pretty well organized, and now this guy I don't even know is asking me to speak. And I said, "You want me to speak at the roundup?" He said, "No, I don't know." He said, "I'm the speaker getter for this other meeting, and but it's hard finding someone, because the roundup's going on." And I said, "Yeah, sure, that's fine, no problem." So, and my wife was there, and so I think like a minute or two into me and him talking about it, she's smart, my wife here. She does like all the timekeeping and scheduling most of the time, and she figured it out, and she said, "That's the night of your birthday, because my birthday is today." August 30th, 1975. So I'm 50 years old today. And so my wife asked, she said, "Do you want to, that's a big birthday. Do you want to spend your birthday, speaking at a meeting?" And I thought about it for about a half a second. And, the truth is, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my parents and my mom giving birth to me 50 years ago. But I wouldn't still be alive if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous. And so to be able to spend my 50th birthday in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is really, it's an honor to me, and it's a testament to Alcoholics Anonymous that I can even reach the age of 50. So that's a little bit like how I got here tonight, because I was some guy that wasn't going to the roundup, right? Anyways, so my sobriety date is August 18th, 1994. And so I got 31 years sober on August 18th, so just a couple of weeks ago. And so just like Jessica was talking about, and you guys do, it's a little bit of like what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So we're just going to blow right through this. And I'm happy to be here. I love this meeting. I love these very uncomfortable, torturous seats that really like gauge how willing we are to stay sober, right? It's like no pain left behind. It's like I'm in AA, there's no more pain, right? No, come sit in the seats, which is good. I wonder if those are padded. I don't know, because we've got, no, they're not. Okay. Well, I'm happy to be here because this reminds me a lot of, this environment and how it is from, a lot of my early AA. But what it was like for me is so I was born in Arcadia. Does anyone know where Arcadia is? It seems like a town most people don't. It's by Pasadena. That usually helps out. So, unlike Jessica, I had parents that they didn't drink. They didn't smoke. They didn't cuss. We used to go to church on Sundays, I think, until I became unpresentable. There was nothing in my environment growing up that would ever lend itself to me becoming an alcoholic or starting to live the way I eventually started living. So it was nothing environmental, or it was none of like I'm trying to follow anyone else's lead on anything. I did watch a lot of movies and MTV. And so there was a lot of like, there are people that live very different, than my family lives. And I thought, okay, so there's something else. But, I was told, here are the things we don't do. And I thought, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. But, from a very early age, I was always having really big thoughts. Like I remember being, I don't know how old I was, but I remember being really little. I was born in 75, and I'm glad I'm here with this crowd that, a lot of you guys are going to be able to relate to me. So this was like pre-seatbelt or something. Like I'm like laying down in the back of my mom's Cadillac, staring up out of the window, looking at the clouds, contemplating the meaning of life. And I'm like 5 years old. And it's like, why are we here? Where did we come from? How far out does space go? What is the point? I would look out the window and see people, and it's like, and where are they going? And what did they do to get these cars and these clothes? And like, and what is all of this? And like, what is the point? And I there was just so much to me that didn't make sense. And it seemed like life was just in high definition. And, from a very young age, I started to feel separate from other people. Like I would go to school and it would seem like other kids had things figured out. I didn't know what they had figured out, but they had it figured out, right? They knew how to dress and walk and talk and act and play with each other and do things. And I was usually kind of like the loner and the watcher and, just trying to like get a feel for things, but just not engaging. And I just, I had some friends, but they were usually more of like the degenerate class. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of easy to fit in with like the troublemakers because it's like, their bar to entry was pretty low, and, but there was a lot that I was just disconnected from. And it was interesting because I remember it was before I got to junior high. So I was like still in elementary school. I don't even know the terms for all this stuff. But I think it was like elementary school, and I would play sick sometimes, because I knew I could be like, "Oh, Mom, I'm not feeling good," and then I'd stay home all day and I'd just like watch cartoons and and hang out, and I never did homework. I don't ever remember doing homework. I remember I would just take it. I would go in the backyard and I'd crumple it up right when I'd get home, and I'd throw it over the fence. So if my mom checked my backpack, nothing would be there. And then one day the neighbor saw this like pile of paperwork and like opened it up and was like, "What the heck is this?" And I guess told my mom, and my mom's like, "Have you been throwing your homework?" And I was just like, "What? What do you mean? No." Like, because I don't know. Like I wasn't following the whole like learn thing. Like school just seemed really easy and then boring. It was like, yeah, I get it. Move on. Like why? Like I get all this. You're so slow. And it's a waste of time. And like, how am I going to apply this? I don't get the meaning of life. But I thought one day when I was homesick, that like was the day when they must have like told all the kids, like, because that's what I thought. That's what made sense to me, is like there must have been a day where they were like, "All right, kids, today's the day, like where we're going to explain it. Like we're going to tell you like the secret, right? Like we're going to give you like the manual to life or something." Because I started to think like, how does everyone getting it and I'm not, And I thought maybe like I wasn't there that day and everyone else got it, and they all know I wasn't there, so they know I don't get it, right? A little bit paranoid, right? But like it's what made sense in my little alcoholic mind, and I felt so disconnected, and I was trying to figure stuff out. And at the age of 13, I started smoking cigarettes. I started like really rebelling, and I'm skateboarding, and that's what me and my friends would do. We'd skateboard and we'd break stuff, and we'd run from cops, and we're like climbing up on top of the school roof smoking cigarettes, and I met this kid, and he came from a very different environment. His parents drank, they smoked, they both stabbed each other. I think my first time there, his brother was cleaning a shotgun on the kitchen table. Like it was just like part of what they did. And I was just like, wow, I like you guys. Like I can hang out, here, because they didn't care. There was no need to hide it, because I was having to hide everything. I had to hide everything, and so I started hanging out over there, and I'm drinking. And I'm smoking weed, and I'm hanging out with people that are a lot older than me, and it was a lot of fun. Getting drunk, because to me, like, and even then they would want to like drink and talk, like we're going to go to a party, like a little thing, and they want to drink and talk and socialize, and like I realized real quick, like getting drunk's where it's at. Like that's it. Like if I am on the ground, on my hands and knees, crawling because I can't stand, like that's it. That's gold right there, And I realized too, if I throw up, then there's room for more, right? I get to start all over again. I just get to reboot the system. And, and I was a sloppy drunk. And because I always wanted to get there, and I always got there, and sometimes they'd throw me in a room, and I would just sit there and watch the room spin, and I learned you could just put your foot on the floor, if you're lying in bed, and it stops the room from spinning for a minute, and then you get back on the ride and you take your foot off till it spins. I don't know how that works, but is that just me? Maybe that was just me. I don't know. Okay, we got a couple takers here. Yeah, and it was, and it was fun, and I didn't mind just watching the room spin by myself because I wasn't a social person. I didn't need you to be my friend. I'm drunk. What do you have to offer me? That, you know what I mean? Like, why would I want to talk to you? I don't care. But I just needed to be cute enough that people are like, oh, let's get the little kid drunk. And that's what they do. Let's see what happens when we give him this. And it's just like, okay, lock him up. And so somehow one of the things that started through here is that disconnection that I had on like, I don't fit, I don't belong, I don't get the world, I don't get any of this. But it was just like, I don't understand. And then it was like this pain that started to develop. And it wasn't a physical pain, it was a spiritual pain. And I didn't have the vocabulary to describe what was going on at the time, but the way I could describe it now was like it was a form of spiritual cancer that was developing inside of me. There was a part of me that was going really dark. And at first, it would come and go, and then it started to grow, and it wouldn't go away. And it became so painful in a way that was undescribable. The only thing that could take the edge off was being drunk. And I could get so drunk that it would just kind of like numb it. And then I would have to endure until the next time. But because my parents didn't drink or smoke or do anything, I knew I had to hide it because then I'd get in trouble. I don't know what kind of trouble I would get in, but it's probably just my parents' disappointment. So I was really good at like lying and getting away with stuff and like, hey, why are you home late and why can't you walk? I'm really sick. I think I have the flu and I can't go to school tomorrow. Because I got to nurse a hangover, but I'm telling them I'm sick. And they didn't know about alcoholism and what to look for, and I was just lying to them. And so when I was in, I think it was junior high or high school, here's what I knew about alcoholism or alcoholics was, I don't know if you guys remember this, there was this little commercial from a treatment center called Schick. Does anyone remember Schick? And I remember being this kid, and this commercial would come on, and it would be this dark room, and it would be someone in a robe with a candle, and they'd be like, I'm Beth, and I'm an alcoholic. And then they'd like pass the candle, and it'd be like, I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. And they're all wearing like these like brown monk robes, and it would pan out, and it'd be all of them. And it's like, if you have a problem with drinking, you could do our 30-day spin dry at Schick. And I was just like, and I just thought to myself, like, monks must have a drinking problem because I thought they were monks, and that was the first time I ever heard of a drinking problem or I'm an alcoholic, and I had no idea. I knew what a wino was, and that's the guy in the gutter, but I didn't know what this thing was. So what happened is I somehow graduate high school up in Arcadia, and I moved to Orange County. Okay, I used to surf as well, and that was a place I was familiar with. I have an older sister, and she was going to college here, so I was going to move to Huntington Beach and become the Ferris Bueller of Orange County. It didn't work. I was absolutely terrified. I knew like 2 places to go and eat and school, and I ate at those places, and I went to school. Because life is in high def, and the house I was living in, it was my sister and her boyfriend and my sister's friend and her mom. And her mom, she didn't care if she'd buy me alcohol. So I'd give her some money and she'd, go buy me some alcohol. And when I'd run back to my old friends and I'd buy a sack and I was having a great time, like no parental supervision. I don't have to hide anything now. And I'm getting drunker than I've ever been, throwing up, trying to go to school, and no one ever gave me a plan on like you take this class and that class. Like I didn't know. I was just kind of showing up, and like I would take a lot of night classes. And I remember somehow I came up on a set of like hospital scrubs, like doctor's scrubs. I don't know how I came up on them, but like I remember wearing those to like night classes. And one kid like asked me one time, he was like, are you a doctor? And I was just like, why, is there something wrong with you? And he was just like, oh no, I was like, wow, these scrubs, I get a little bit of respect. I don't know where they came from, but I'm sitting in the back of a forum reading High Times magazine, drawing how I'm going to make a bong, wearing hospital scrubs, not knowing, and I'm still don't know how to do homework, right? But through all this, that spiritual cancer developed more and more, and it became so painful, it was undeniable. And even when I'd get drunk, it would still be there. And I hated myself, and I hated the world, and I hated everyone. And I knew all the people that wronged me or made fun of me or bullied me or whatever it may have been. And I felt like everyone had to pay, and I wanted everyone to pay, to know how wrong they were, and then I could kill myself because I couldn't make the pain go away, and I couldn't make sense of it. And so it really seemed like suicide was the only option. And I knew people that had killed themselves before. I had known quite a few people that had been either murdered or gone to jail or had committed suicide. So I was familiar with, like, you know, where a lot of this stuff can wind up. But, you know, I would think of my parents, and I'd think of my family, and, you know, what that would put them through, and that I couldn't do that, but I still had this pain. And so the best thing that I could come up with is I used to have these, technically they were called tacks, but it's like these artists' nails. It was like a short nail that almost looked like a screw, and they were really sharp. And I don't know why I had these. I was an artist too, and so I had just like art supplies, torture devices. But I would sit there in my room wanting to kill myself, just drunk, but with that spiritual cancer just almost stopping my heart of like, I just can't be here, and I can't kill myself. And I could not understand, because I didn't know what alcoholism was. I didn't understand what I was experiencing. But I'd put a tack in my thumb and the other one in my other finger, and I would just sit there, and they would go all the way in, and I would just sit there, and through my tears, I would just watch the blood come out of myself dripping down my arm, and I would think to myself, the pain inside of me I cannot control and I do not understand, but this I understand. This I have control over. And that was the only control I felt like I had in those times. And just having some form of control that I could wrap my head around was the thing that stopped me from finding another alternative. I did try to kill myself once. I tried to drown myself in my sink. It doesn't work. I tried to you have to put like a cinder block on your head or something. Like, it didn't work. Like, I would just spring out. It was really weird. I'd be like, here we go. And like my subconscious would be like, nope. And, but like I had that much pain. So ultimately what happened is I had this, I'm going to Orange Coast College, and I had this teacher, and she's like, you know, I'm in rough shape. I'm not showering. I'm not brushing my teeth. I'm not doing any of that because I don't care and I don't get it. And I'm just taking classes. And this teacher, she had shared part of her story, and she had a really rough, like, childhood, and she had suffered. And she used to have, like, other students go in her classroom and just, like, hang out and talk. And everyone liked her, and I liked her. And then one day I just wound up in her classroom, and there were other students in there. Next thing you know, like, they all left, and then it was just me and her. And I remember she just asked me, she's like, you know, hey, like how's it going? And I couldn't remember the last time someone asked me, like, how's it going? But, like, she meant it, you know? Like, she wanted to know, like, how I was doing. And, you know, and I didn't have a cry for help. I didn't have a planned pitch of, like, I'm doing good. Like, and so I just told her, I'm just like, it hurts. She's like, what hurts? I said, just existing. Like, life, everything. It all hurts. And she understood, and she listened to my fumbled ramblings of trying to explain what I was experiencing inside. And she listened, and I could tell she cared. I knew she cared. And she said, you know, you might be an alcoholic. And I said, I'm not a monk. Now, she didn't laugh because she never saw the commercial, but that's what I thought, right? Like, I'm not a monk. And she was like, okay, moving on. She said, no, you might have a problem drinking. And I never thought I could have a problem drinking. And she explained to me what alcoholism was. She explained to me what Alcoholics Anonymous was. Her husband was sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she learned how to talk to people like me through watching her husband 12-step people. And she talked to me. And I told her how I wanted a lot of people to pay for what they had done. And she was like, you might want a therapy as well. So I respected her, and I said, okay. So so there was no, I didn't get arrested. I didn't go to treatment. Like, I got the yellow pages, and I ripped out the page that had Alcoholics Anonymous in it, and I called them, and they said, here's where a meeting is. And I got the Thomas Guide, because we're old school, right? Yellow pages and Thomas Guides. And I went to Alice's Breakfast in the Park in Huntington Beach. And I walked in there at a noon meeting, and they're chain smoking cigarettes. I mean, I thought there was like a screen door or something. That was just the smoke in there. I mean, there were like 3 ashtrays on every table, so they didn't have to empty them halfway through. And it's all a bunch of like, gray-haired older people, and I'm 18, And they gave me a test, which I was a little bit offended by. I'm like, I didn't even have a chance to study, but let's ace this, you know what I mean? And I passed the test, and then afterwards, this guy talked to me in the parking lot for like an hour and a half, just 12-stepping me, which I didn't understand at the time, because the whole time he's telling me his story, and I'm like, you're so selfish, you know what I mean? Anyways, so I bounced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous till I finally hit my bottom. I started working in the film industry, and I had to be on the set super early in the morning. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be sober. I'm going to be sober. I'm going to do this. And I think I'm going to do this. And then I got home really late one night from work, and this girl that lived upstairs from me, she's like, hey, I've got some Big Mouth Mickeys. Off I go. I'm drinking. I wake up late for work the next day. My teacher's husband, he had become. I asked him to be my sponsor, and so I call him. Before I called him, I remember waking up and just sitting at the edge of my bed thinking to myself, like, how long has this been going on where my clutch is slipping? How long has this been going on where, like, I think I need to know, I think I know what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. And I don't, because, like, I don't remember making that choice last night to do it. Like, it just happened. I knew I shouldn't have done it. I didn't want to do it, and I did it anyways, and it terrified me. And so I called him, and that was August 18th of 1994, and I dove into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I started going to meetings with him. He was like, you got to go to a meeting every single day, and I was like, I don't want to do that, but I will do whatever you tell me to do. He said, you're going to call me every day. You're going to go to a meeting every day. I said, how long do I have to go to a meeting every single day? He said, till you want to go to meetings every single day. I was like, I see your trick. It's not a good trick. I see it. Like, I'm just going to have to keep going to meetings. He's like, yeah. And so I started going to meetings. And back then I was going on Monday nights. It was the Seal Beach Speakers meeting. That was one of my home groups. Nice, excellent meeting, and then on Wednesday nights I was going to the Icebreakers meeting. I was back in Los Alamitos, and so I'm going to I didn't know, I'm new to AA. I mean, I know the Alano Club, right? I know that's the I know the Alano Club, but going to Seal Beach, I mean, that's like, they got the greeters and the whole. It's like what we have here, such wonderful, hospitality. But it's just it's a huge, huge scale. I mean, back then it was this like massive thing, and I'm terrified. I'm 18 years old, walking in, and my sponsor's introducing me to everyone. He's like, you got to get phone numbers. And so I go, I'm just going up to like girls. I'm like, hey, could I get your number? I'm sponsor directed. I got to get a number here. I got to call somebody. You know what I mean? And my sponsor's like, oh, what numbers did you get? And he's like, go get guys' phone numbers. I'm like, what? You didn't specify. Like, I'm following the rules here, And like, he's like, no, don't. And he's like, don't call him. Just like let him talk to the guys. And and I'm going to the Icebreakers meeting, which is a bunch of like World War II vets, Vietnam vets, and a bunch of other people, and these, I love these guys because I'm a very I want to know the rules. Like, what's the game plan? What are we doing here? And, and I got into the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was like, well, where do we come from? What is the history of AA? Who are these guys? What is this thing, right? And I just dove into the history, and we dove into the book. And I love the book of Alcoholics Anonymous because like those guys would sit with me. Those guys would sit with me before and after the meeting, and we would open the book and we would read it, and my sponsor, and we'd go through that thing word for word, and we'd go slow so I could get it, and we start working the steps, and I was being of service right away. It was like, we got to be a service. Like, you're going to greet people. And at Icebreakers, it was like, you're going to be the cake guy, and you're going to pick up the cigarette butts, and you're going to clean the ashtrays. And like, and it was like, you're going to get into it. And I think I had 30 days sober, and they're like, you got to go to this address and pick up this guy. I'm like, well, who am I picking up? They're like, it doesn't matter. You're just going to go pick him up. There's going to be a guy out front. I'm like, well, I got to know which guy. They're like, you'll know the guy. And I'm picking up newcomers, because they're like, you have a car. He doesn't. You got 30 days. You're picking him up. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And in my first Christmas sober, we used to go to Sacramento every Christmas to do a big family thing, and I'm like, I'm not ready to go do that. Like, I'm going to have a meltdown or something. Like, I need to stay local. And it was my first marathon meeting season. And on Christmas Eve, I remember my sponsor said, don't have any plans because we're going to go do something. I said, okay. And him and a friend picked me up in this van. I don't know where they got a van from. Neither one of them drove a van. I don't know what they were playing, but they have a van, and there's no seats in the back. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. And we drive to Compton, And they're like, there are guys in these sober livings in Compton, and they got no place to go, and they got nothing, and we're going to go bring them some like sober holiday cheer. And I was like, okay. And I remember it was pouring rain, and we drive up there, and we get into this sober living, and there's like 3 guys in there, and these guys are in rough shape. And I'm a little bit outside of my comfort zone because I'm just like, I'm still relatively new, but I walk in, I realize they're drunks just like me, and I got more time than these 3 guys. And it's not about like, oh, I'm better than. Because these guys, I'm like, you guys could, I'm a kid. But it was like, they were like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I went to meetings, and like, I try to help people, and like, I'm working the steps, and I'm like, and you can do it too. And it was just like being of service, And, I want to share something else here too. I remember we're out front of the old Seal Beach speaker meeting, and I had my first job sober. My sponsor was like, you got to get a job. And I'm like, it seems a bit extreme, but I'll do whatever you tell me. And so I got a job, and I was wearing a suit and tie to this job. It was like a postal store thing. I don't think they had like a dress code. So I'm wearing a suit and tie, which is like not my deal. You know what I mean? Not my deal. And my sponsor, he's like a rock and roll guy, right? He's got like long hair. You know what I mean? He's like a guitar player. And after the meeting, like there was this person who had come in that looked like they were in rough shape, and they were sitting in the back of the meeting, kind of coming and going, and we kind of had our eye, and I'm like, maybe we should go talk to him. So me and my sponsor are the cleanup people. When we clean everything up and we're leaving, we lock the doors, and we see the person is like standing out there, right? And so we go over and we talk to this guy, and we're talking with him, and my sponsor's like, hey, can we help you? And we're doing the whole 12-step thing, and like, we can get you into a place tonight. Let's do that. And so my sponsor said, told this guy, give me a minute. I'm going to go over to the payphone. We're going to make some calls, right? So I start, talking to this person, just a little bit, and this gentleman was like, I understand you're trying to help me, but I can't hear a word you're saying. I said, well, why is that? He said, look at you. You're wearing a suit, and your hair's done. You have a tie. I said, look at you. I can't get past the way you look. I don't get it. He said, I could talk to him, though. And he wasn't trying to be rude, but I realized it was just like, there was just a separation. I had to understand like who I was talking to. And I wanted to be like, no, I normally don't dress like this, but it's like, that was the thing. And, and I realized it was like, it's like, come as you are, you know what I mean? Be accepted as you are. Love others the way they are, right? You got to love people for where they're at, not where you want them to be, right? And, and I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was interesting, too, when my grand sponsor told my sponsor he had to cut off his hair and start wearing a collared shirt to meetings. And then my sponsor did it, and I lost respect for him because I was like, be who you are. Like, your sponsor is not your dictator, right? Like your sponsor is not royalty. I don't believe in AA royalty, right? And I think he regretted it as soon as he cut his hair. Because I was like, your long hair and the way you are is what connected with this person this one time, and helped us get them into a place. But so, we get into the steps, we get into service, we're doing this thing, and to me, I wanted Alcoholics Anonymous to be a part of my being, and that's what I did. All the way, Alcoholics Anonymous, doing the steps, getting sponsees. And then, like, just about less than a year sober, one of the guys was like, hey, should we tell him? I'm like, tell me what? And they said, other young people are staying sober. I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, people my age? And they were like, yeah, there's other teenagers staying sober, because, like, everyone else was, like, twice my age. And I was like, where? And they're like, oh, just down the street at, like, the women's club. They have, like, a young people's meeting. And I was like, what? Why didn't you tell me? They're like, because we wanted you to get a foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous before we unleashed you on the young people. I was just like, and I had a foundation because I'd been doing it. Like, I've been doing the deal. And I started going to the young people's meetings. And on the first one, I was like, oh, I get it now. I get why you wanted me to get a foundation first. But I started going to young people's meetings as well, because now it was like, okay, like, you're in college, I'm in college, right? You got a girlfriend issue, I got a girlfriend issue, right? Because everyone else is like, tell me the story about flying drunk in a blackout over Vietnam again, or, like, doing the crazy stuff, which, like, I can't relate. I get it, I respect it, but, like, we're not going through the same thing. And so like in young people's AA, it's still AA. It's just a lot of young people that are like, surrendering a lot, earlier and doing that whole thing and then getting into service, you know what I mean? Taking service to another level. I was in Orange County and we started a young people's, committee down there, Aokipa. And, and there's these conventions that they have, and young people's, they love conventions, you know what I mean? And it's like there was this California convention, and like we get involved in that. And then like, we hosted one in Orange County, and then I got elected to be on the board of directors for like the advisory council for this thing. And I spent 8 years being on that board of directors and doing that and like helping other people create these celebrations of sobriety for young people in AA. And then I was able to do that at the international level for 7 years with the International Conference of Young People in AA, being on their board of directors and engaging with Alcoholics Anonymous at like, another level, right? Because we have 3 Alcoholics Anonymouses, right? We've got like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is like, here's the program, here's what we do, okay? We've got like this Alcoholics Anonymous where we all come together. And then we have the Alcoholics Anonymous, which is like the legal entity, right? Like AA World Services, and like, we got the Grapevine. It's like, so it's like, there's kind of like 3 different like AAs that all come together and like to start to like engage with like AA, like in New York, as it relates to like young people stuff and coordination, because there's a special relationship between some of these, and learn about like the service manual, right? And like really starting to understand like through seeing of differences between like elder statesmen and bleeding deacons, right? And it's like, and it really helped me understand a lot more of like some of us in Alcoholics Anonymous, because a lot of those old timers like Ted Harbaugh and Frank Honeycutt, like to me, those were the elder statesmen, right? These old timers, and I would see them, quietly with their love, not grandstanding, and then I would see like the AA royalty of like, kiss my, chip, and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, I don't think so, champ. I am not one of those guys. You are one drink away just like me. You might have a longer insurance policy than I do, but it's like, I'm doing the same work that you are. You know what I mean? Like you still wipe your ass and got to pray in the morning just like me. So AA royalty, never a fan of it. But, I wanted to, have things in my life too. I'm graduating college and trying to figure out what I'm going to do for a career. And I always knew that like one of the things I wanted to be a part of my life sober, because I'm doing, hold on, I want to take a step back. I know a lot of people struggle in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I feel like for a long time I would see people be like, they would burn it down. It would be like, I got some time, I'm doing good, and then they burn it down. I've got a lot of friends that have done this. I know a lot of people. It's like, I'm sober, relapse, got a job, burn it down. And I see a lot of rebuilding. And I'm like, man, rebuilding is just exhausting. Like, what if we never destroyed it? Right? Like, what if we just like stacked cool on top of cool, you know what I mean? Like success on top of success. It's like every, like you haven't relapsed, but it's like, why are we just, there's so much destruction. Like maybe we just like not destroy, right? And then I started to notice that some people are they can get in this mentality of like, I'm always going to struggle because I'm an alcoholic. And from my experience, that's not it. Like we don't have to always, like I'm always going to be an alcoholic, but I don't always have to suffer. I mean, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that I have says that we can be restored to sanity. It does not say that we're cured. I'm still an alcoholic, but we can be restored to sanity. We can work these steps that are really fairly basic and learn how to align our will with God's will. And I no longer have to live in a place of like, oh, I have to take contrary action. I don't want to take contrary action at 31 years old because my initial action is a lot more aligned with what God would do than like, my selfish life is of making it all about me, right? So I don't have to go through life constantly saying, I want to do that, I can't do it. Like, trust me, there are definitely times where I have ideas that are bad. I'm the bad idea guy. You know what I mean? Like, I love bad ideas, but I got to flush them out so I can be like, look, we added some more to the bucket. But usually, like, my first thought is pretty well. But I always keep it in check, too. Because I never want to be one of those guys to be like, I got it all figured out, Because I'd see those guys that got it all figured out. And a lot of times they're either miserable, they're lying, or they relapse, And I like to be like, all right, I want to check myself, because early on I realized I want to be like if I'm feeling good or if I'm feeling bad, I want to do what we're doing here. Let's keep taking inventory. Let's keep looking at our life and be like, all right, am I missing anything? Is there anything that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing? Is there anything that I'm not doing that I should be doing? Because I don't want to get too far off the beam. I don't want to get too far off the beam and lose my goal, right? And so I've been able to stay on the beam, but I knew that there were some things that I wanted. Of course, I always wanted to fall in love and get married and have kids and have a house and, and then this whole thing and go just beyond, me. I wanted to have a family. And, I remember there was a speaker this one time that was talking about how, she had wanted the same thing and she was complaining to her sponsor. And, and her sponsor was like, well, you're ready, but, maybe, he's not. And you just haven't met him yet, So it's like maybe God's not done with him, right? So and that always stuck with me. And I thought, I should probably prepare. I should probably make some adjustments in my life emotionally, mentally, spiritually, within my heart and my mind. I should create some space for the things, that I want. And I started doing that. And it was like, I don't know who she is, but I don't want to meet her and be like, hey, hold on, let me get my shit together. You know what I mean? I was like, I want to at least have some momentum. And Jessica and I had been friends. We had been friends before we started dating, and we have a lot of friends in AA. We were on a camp out, I think, is when we both were like, I like you, and we started dating. And she had a son, Aiden, 3 years old, and I fell in love with him as well. And I was like, I love this little guy, and I love her. And and we got engaged, and we got married, and now we have a daughter together. And Jessica and I have been married for more than a decade now, sober, and our kids have never seen us drunk or high or arrested or any of that. And they know we go to meetings and we're very open and honest. And I think in our household, we practice, these principles in all of our affairs. Even just today, we were talking with our son about some of the struggles that he's having right now, being able to talk to him in the same, tone and decorum that we would, a newcomer that's young in areas and learning. There's one other thing, there's another thing I want to touch on, because I'm not a circuit speaker. They asked me to speak and they never asked me to come back because I don't have a canned pitch. I don't care. You know what I mean? I don't have a canned pitch. I'm not one of those guys. I knew guys that would rehearse. I remember back in the day, I knew these guys would be like, oh, I got to get my pitch together and record it. I want to be a circuit speaker. I'm like, I don't think you should be. I don't think that's I don't think you should design your, okay. I mean, whatever, I don't know. But here's one. These are the ramblings of a sober person. One of the things I want to talk about, because I don't get to talk very often, was the emotional maturity. When I was new, I'm going to go back about 31 years now. When I was new, I'd call my sponsor, to check in and be like, I don't want to go to a meeting. I don't feel like I want to go to a meeting. He'd say, oh, I don't care what you want. And I don't care how you feel. All I care is what you do. And then he'd hang up on me, and I'd get my feelings hurt. And then I'd go to a meeting and complain about my sponsor, right? And he just didn't care how I felt. All he cared about was what I did. And I realized if my sponsor cared about how I felt and he coddled me as a newcomer, I guarantee you I would not be sober today. I wouldn't be. If he was so much worried about how I felt rather than what I did, because emotionally I was not mature. And I started to realize that part of my development, not just the steps in healing my spiritual cancer and having a working God in my life, was the emotional piece. And Bill, he wrote to the Grapevine. I forget what year it was. I think it was the 60s maybe, where he wrote to the Grapevine. This is back when they would publish everything. He would write a letter and they'd publish it. There was no should we publish it? They just did it. And he wrote this letter, and it was about his emotional sobriety. And it was him coming to his own personal realization that there was more for sobriety, that other people that had been sober longer than him had figured out certain things, but there was something that he had missed, and it was this emotional piece. Well, enough people had written in Grapevine over years with this piece, a part of their story, that they put these stories together, and the Grapevine published a book. You can get it. It's called Emotional Sobriety. And I read this book, and every morning I would wake up, and after my prayers, I would read one of the stories in this book, and I would, understand it, and I would absorb it, and I would go through my day to try and, understand, how these things that I'm learning can be applied in my life. And so I started to really understand this emotional piece, which is like, kind of like beyond the steps, but so essential in so much of our recoveries, because, I like people, right? And I got a lot of friends, and, as I'm getting sober, I got, these road dogs that I know, and we're getting sober, and, we're getting time, and to hear these guys that are, they're doing the deal. Like, you got a list, they're doing the list, they're doing it. And I like to talk to people, and they like to talk to me, and they're like, dude, something's wrong. I'm missing something. Because I like to talk. I'm like, let's sit down, let's talk. What's going on? And they, and I'm like, you're doing everything you're supposed to do. They're like, yeah, I'm missing something though. I start to realize it's that emotional piece, right? The very thing that had been like, we're not going to let your emotions dictate the action you should take, but nonetheless, this emotional piece was incredibly important. And because I had like started to develop some emotional sobriety, and I then would be able to like talk with these other individuals about this like what Bill called the next frontier, of sobriety, and to add that in. And, through all these years, I've been able to see how like the emotions that we have, right? Like the things, we call them feelings because we feel them. Everyone hates this, I understand. This is why no one likes me, you know what I mean? I have therapist friends that are like, we don't talk about that. I'm like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, aren't you the person that's supposed to talk about that, right? But it's like, it's so important, because it's like, what a resentment is? It's a feeling, and for me, I don't know about you, but I feel it. Oh, I feel that resentment. You know what I mean? I feel it loud and clear. You know what I mean? The fear, oh, I feel it, right? There are things that we feel. And I ran from those by smoking and drinking and doing all the stuff we did, right? And I could not do it. But if I don't, see these things and go, oh, there's another way to let things go other than that. I got a solution for my drinking, and I can also have a solution for my emotions, because I was a rager. When I was new, I used to run people off the road, and like I had a fast car, and I was like, look at me wrong, I will take you out. You know what I mean? I would rage and want to destroy stuff, and I had my emotions were out of control. So I learned about like, emotional sobriety being, on another level for me. And maybe you don't need it. And if you don't, fantastic. Like Bill saw, there's some people that just get it. And if you get it, like, that's awesome. I did not. I had to do research. I had to do practice. But that's one of those things that really helped me, like, just drop into, like, having a deeper, like, understanding of my sobriety and, like, what I could do with my life and the way that I can evolve and the way that I can grow, right? The way that as far as I've come, I still have further to go, right? And, I still absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. I can never get it right with my home groups, because like when I lived in Orange County for 10 years, my home group was in Compton 435 intergroup. I loved going to Compton. That was I'm like, I'm in Orange County, but I drive to Compton for my home group. And now that we live in Lomita here, we moved here right when we got engaged. And now I live in Lomita, and my home group is in Orange County. It's the Catalina wine mixer on Wednesday nights. You won't find it in a directory. It's unlisted, and it's me and like 15 other guys in a warehouse, and like 10 of them I've probably known for 20 plus years. And we're just doing this thing together. So it's like, Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life. I would not be here. I would not be celebrating 50 years old or being in your presence at this meeting tonight if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, if it wasn't for what we do here. And I love the fact that we get to share and to help and to be an example, not just to other alcoholics, but to other people. Because I love talking to people when I go out and about through the world. I love just asking, how are you doing today? Everywhere I go, I ask me, how are you doing today? And people just say, oh, here's how we're doing. Because I'm genuinely interested, whether you're an alcoholic or not, and like, how are you doing today? Right? To like care more about other people than myself. Take an interest in like, what's the quality of your life? And what can I do for you? And sometimes it's just a smile. Sometimes it's a thank you. It's a lot further than me flipping someone off and running them off the road. So with that, I'll go ahead and end, and I will say once again, thank you for having me out tonight. I'm so glad that we are all here, and I hope everyone at the Roundup is having a good time out there. Thank you.